Pay attention. Details matter.
Spoiler warning. By the time Death and Other Details reaches the halfway mark of the season, its own complicated storyline has already overwhelmed its witty and razor-sharp writing. When Mandy Patinkin first appears in the first episode of Death and Other Details, it's simple to know what kind of character he's playing because the gentleman detective has a nearly 200-year history dating back to the origins of crime fiction. Many people consider Patinkin's Rufus Coatsworth as the best detective in the world, and he fits in well with the likes of Hercule Poirot and Sherlock Holmes. Death and Other Details deliberately plays with the tropes of the detective story to hook viewers in right away, but it also explores aspects of Rufus' past at a later point. Death and Other Details creators and showrunners Heidi Cole McAdams and Mike Weiss have acknowledged that Agatha Christie was a key inspiration, and the plot has a distinctly Christie-esque setup, though it spreads its mystery across 10-hour-long episodes and loses some of its concentration as it examines different members of its large ensemble. It's not quite as economical as Christie's work. Its sharp and frequently humorous moments are its strongest parts, but its complicated plotting drags it down. While Patinkin is the most well-known member of the ensemble, Rufus isn't the primary character in Death and Other Details. Since Imogene Scott, Violet Bean from The Flash, hasn't seen Rufus in almost 20 years, she is the true protagonist. Imogene was raised by her mother's employers, the affluent Collier family, after her mother was killed by a car bomb when she was 11 years old. Rufus was recruited by the Colliers to investigate the murder of Imogene's mother, but in spite of his assurances to the contrary, he finally gave up on the case. That's what Imogene has always thought, at least. But nothing in Death and Other Details is quite as it seems, just like in a good mystery. On a 10-day luxury cruise liner journey, which is paid for by the Colliers, their friends, and partners, Imogene runs into Rufus once again in celebration of the upcoming retirement of patriarch Lawrence Collier as CEO of the family business. Since the Colliers have reserved a renovated antique ship for the voyage, everyone on board is under suspicion when businessman Keith Trubetsky is found dead in his chamber. The brash Keith was trading with Collier fails on trip, and during his brief stay on the ship, he seems to have enraged almost everyone he came into contact with. Imogene finds herself a possible top suspect because of her own tendency to take jerks to task. To defend her name, she must work with Rufus to identify the true murderer. The best aspect of Death and Other Details is the interaction between Patinkin and Bean. The show is most interesting when Rufus and Imogene are working together, enjoying their mutual passion for solving crimes. Happily, Imogene's misplaced animosity toward Rufus is swiftly resolved, allowing them to collaborate as a team despite the clever rivalry between two individuals who are constantly trying to outsmart one another. But Death and Other Details has a far larger ensemble than simply Rufus and Imogene, and the show frequently gets bogged down in its several subplots, each of which has its own disclosures and double crosses. All of them work as red herrings or hints to help Rufus and Imogene solve the murder. Perhaps, by the time of the last episodes, which were not available for review, all the loose ends will be tied off. Not every viewer will find it worth the effort, even if McAdams and Weiss manage that narrative accomplishment. The route there can be taxing at times. In addition, the large cast features the other members of the Collier family, Imogene's childhood best friend Anna, who will succeed her father as CEO if he ever steps down, Catherine, and his mother, who has a troubled marriage to Lawrence, and Layla, and his wife, a former journalist who appears to be obsessed with conspiracy theories. Anna's ex-girlfriend Eleanor Chun, the Chun family's chief representative, is the person the Colliers are trying to negotiate a multi-billion-dollar transaction with, not to mention a powerful religious figure, a governor of a state, and the whole crew, which includes two men, ship owner Sunil and security chief Jules, with whom Imogene instantly clicks sexually. There's a lot to keep track of for both viewers and the program, and Death and Other Details frequently loses focus by delving into the dubious actions of its supporting cast. When Linda Emmond, a stern Swedish Interpol agent, appears at the end of the second episode, Rufus and Imogene aren't even allowed to play detective on their own. Aside from Emmond's thick Swedish accent, Patinkin has an enigmatic, faintly British one. It sounds as though they are trying to see who can pronounce murder the most ridiculously. While there is humor to be found in the concept of two brilliant but diametrically opposite eccentric detectives trying to solve the same crime, Death and Other Details lacks the light-hearted fun of fellow Hulu mystery series Only Murders in the Building. Though they are both investigating the same crime, Hilda Erickson, played by Emmond, is the stiff, stoic opposite of Rufus, who is messy and outgoing. Despite this, they don't get many opportunities to argue with one another. While it's obvious that Patinkin and Emmond are enjoying their parts, Bean, who plays Imogene with a lot of dry humor, never lets the experienced actors overpower her. She's also seductive and gloomy, as apt to stew over her mother's unsolved murder as she is to welcome a new conquest into her bedroom. As her older mentor, Bean holds her own against Patinkin, just as Claire Danes did with Patinkin in very different circumstances in the early seasons of Homeland. This could be Bean's big break. Death and Other Details would be more enjoyable if it stayed with that core pair, but adding fresh twists to a murder mystery makes it continue for 10 episodes. In just a few episodes, what appears to be a straightforward homicide turns into a vast, evil plot. If McAdams and Weiss are trying to imitate Agatha Christie as their novel progresses, they find themselves drawing more and more in line with the intricate storytelling of Netflix mystery master Harlan Coben. Death and Other Details never gets as dark or gloomy as a Harlan Coben series, though, and the bright cruise ship setting helps keep things light. The book was first released with the even cheekier title of Career Opportunities in Murder and Mayhem. There are a ton of areas for the characters to explore, so the action doesn't feel limited to one spot. Sunil has carefully rebuilt the gigantic ship's production design to complete 1950s authenticity. With some shoddy special effects on the ocean backdrops, the exteriors are a little less spectacular, but generally, the effect is reminiscent of the opulent design of classic mysteries. The kind of sultry, occasionally graphic sex scenes that Death and Other Details includes were never part of those classic mysteries, but the lasciviousness is merely another way of illustrating how the wealthy pamper themselves. It might be in line with the show's 1% ideal, but it also adds to the tone of inconsistency and the occasionally odd blend of humor and violence. In a 2-hour film, that tonal balance would be easier to adjust, but in a long-form series, it becomes cumbersome. Death and Other Details is frequently ponderous and clumsy, much like the ship it is set on, but Patinkin and Bean keep it vibrant and enthusiastic whenever the tempo begins to falter. Even though Death and Other Details isn't exactly a hit, it does demonstrate that Patinkin is a great gentleman investigator. Kenneth Branagh has an ideal successor in the wings in case he becomes weary of portraying Poirot.